Howdy again, it's Mr. Pete, your internet shop teacher, here with my new Craftsman 15-inch metal cutting bandsaw, and this is part 2 of my video series on repairing this and bringing it up to speed, getting it ready to use. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do today is to try to remove the rust from the table. I already took the table off, which is kind of a big job. I do not like this system that they have here. Now, whenever you work on a piece of machinery, make sure that you unplug it. Let's go over to the bench where I have the table. I think I told you in a previous video that the man said that somebody, while he was sick, apparently set a wet rag on there, and that caused that rust, although I think that would evaporate fairly fast. You can see some rings here, like something was setting on there, but the rust is fairly severe right in this area. Some places it's perfect. I think that is where the miter gauge was setting, so you can see that's brand new, and there was still shipping oil on some of the parts. I've already degreased it. I want to show you something on the other side, but already I have shortened this screw that I talked about in the other video. I didn't like the looks of that. That didn't take but a minute. These trunnions, or whatever you call them, quadrants, are cast iron, very heavy duty, and I like them, but I don't like the rest of the system that I just pointed out to on the saw, because I had to loosen up these and get them to wiggle a little bit in order to tilt the table. So that was just a afterthought mechanism for the engineers over in, the Far East, I should say. I searched and searched through my wife's closet and possessions because she has every Rubbermaid product they ever made, and I thought that I would abscond with one of them and have the kind of container I needed in the right size for that 15 by 15 inch table. But no such luck. So what I did here on this little cart, this Lion roll-around cart, happens to be about the right size, and I put a block of wood here, and that's just a white garbage bag. And you know, this floor in my garage is not level. I think it was poured by the Three Stooges. But I tried to find a spot that was relatively level, because I do not have a whole lot of the Evaporust, probably about a half a gallon, and I don't really need much. I only need a ½ inch at the very most to set the table in. And what I'm going to do then is lay 4 nuts as spacers to get the table off of the actual surface. So I'm going to pour the Evaporust in there and see how much, if I have enough, I should say. Hopefully this won't leak. And I can quickly see how level the table truly is, and if I need to shim it a little bit. And it looks like this end is a little bit high, so I will shim the wheels, and then that'll be that. All right, the depth of the Evaporust is just a little bit above the nuts. Maybe I should use some washers instead of nuts, but let me set this in and see how it looks. I think that's perfect because the fluid came up through the throat plate there. So the depth is just right, and I'm looking at the clock, it's 1:45. I'm going to let it sit in there about 4 hours, and then we'll be back. The next thing I want to do is to take off this aluminum bent bar that I talked about in the first video, and see if I can straighten it. If I cannot straighten it, since I cannot order a new one, I will have to make one. Let me take the black cover off here so you can better see what I'm dealing with. This aluminum guide bar is bent right in here quite a bit, either originally from shipping or damage or abuse, I'm not sure what. Let me move the camera in and you'll see how far off it really is. I temporarily put a hand hacksaw blade in the lower guide. I put a magnet on there to hold it in place, but if you follow this up and compare where the blade is between these two sides here, you can see that I would say it's bent almost 1/4 of an inch. Well, now that I have the beam, I'm going to call this a beam, I don't know what the real name is, but setting it on the surface plate, you can see the bend. Similarly, with the starret straight edge, it's 1/8 off, perhaps. And the bend is right in here. Of course, it's an extrusion, it is hollow, and in general I find extrusion material like this to be kind of soft. Well, how to repair it? You can see why I do not want to make a new one, because there's 2 slots, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 holes. It's doable, but since it's 18 inches long, it's even a rather long piece to put in my short table, 32-inch table, Bridgeport mill. Let me go over to the mill and pinch this in the milling machine vise. I don't think that's going to do it, but let's see if it does anything. Using the starret taper gauge with this on the surface plate, it is bent right up to the maximum there, which is 150 thousandths. That way I can determine if I'm making any progress as I bend it. I have nothing to lose. I really don't think this will work, because generally to straighten something you have to overbend it to allow for spring back, but nevertheless in the jaws of this 6-inch Bridgeport vise we'll see what happens, if anything. Wow, that took out some of the bend. I'm going to measure it just for the heck of it, even though I know it's not fully straight. Well, let's go over to the surface plate and see. It's definitely better, but far from perfect. And now it's 100 thousandths about, so I took out 50 thousandths. A little progress with a few judicial taps of a mallet, dead blow hammer. I'm at about 30 thousandths off. But I'm afraid I will rebend it in a different spot. That's why I'm being so careful and working so slowly. Alright, I'm within about 10 thousandths, and there's a little bit of a twist in this thing too. But this might be good enough. I'm going to reinstall it and try it. Another thought that I am having about this, if this doesn't work, is amputating this much, and that will reduce the overall length, which will reduce the overall height that I can move the guide. But I am of the belief that that tremendous throat, height-wise, is designed for the woodworking one. I do never need to go that high, but let's see how this works when I reinstall it. Alright, I have it temporarily reinstalled in the saw, and it's looking pretty good so far. I put the blade back in here, and you can see now that the blade wants to be about on the center here, so I will move these guides, these round guides, in and out to center them on this blue blade, temporarily anyway. Well, you can see that it's centered up pretty well. And I think I'm done with that. That is, if after I install the rack and pinion, it moves slowly, freely. Okay. Well, that worked too good to be true, so I'm going to go ahead and put the upper wheel back on. Okay, I've got it such that the blade is tracking pretty well, both on the upper and lower wheel, and that wasn't easy, by the way. I had to take the lower wheel off because the tire still wasn't on quite right. Left-hand thread, by the way, I discovered, which is why there's no washers or lock washers on there. Left-hand thread. I made some adjustments to both upper and lower blade guides. They are made of zinc, but pretty well made. I have ordered Starrett bimetal blades, and they'll be in a few days. And by the way, 4 of them cost more than what I paid for the bandsaw. There's really nothing else I can do on the saw itself until the blades arrive at my shop, but in the meantime I'm going to get back to the rust removal of the table. The evaporust has been working for 4 hours. I'm going to flip this over and take a little bit of Scotch-Brite to it and see what it looks like at this time. All right, let it soak another hour and I'll finish it off. All right, I washed it off thoroughly with water out in the yard, and then I blew it dry with my worthless little Horror Freight compressor that will not restart unless it is 100% empty. In other words, it won't restart under load. I knew it would be worthless, and I was right. Okay, this is an interesting casting because it's got these holes here, there and at right angles, which I suppose, and they look like they're about 3/4 for table extensions, probably more useful in the woodworking world than the metalworking. Let me flip it over, and it looks pretty good on that other side. I believe Evaporust is a pretty neat product. Now, it can't do anything about pits or damage to the cast iron, and it is pitted all in here. Right in here I can even feel the pits. Over here 100% good, as I said before. And really, it's done. That's as much as I can do to it. I am going to oil it right now, just with some number 20, and rub it in real good, and that's it. Now, I could go on here with some fine emery cloth, abrasive cloth. I just don't see the need, you know, but that's a personal preference. In other words, I'm too lazy, I guess is what I'm saying. My neighborhood has gone to pot, and somebody bought that wreck of a house over there, and they're removing the garage with a chainsaw. I think it's Daryl and his other brother, Daryl. I went in and borrowed my wife's brand new turkey baster. I'm glad she got a new one. I didn't like that old one, but somebody told me not to save this, but since the container is already empty, and as cheap as I am going to scoop it out of there and save the majority of it for the next small job. Then I'll have to buy a new container of it. Actually, I'm done with rust removing. I don't ever want to do any more in my whole life. All that's left to do in this episode is mount the table onto the machine. I'm not going to show all of that. And then that will conclude this episode, and I'll see you in the next part where we get it up and running and take some trial cuts. This is Mr. Pete saying so long for now.